natural disaster management or workings of global businesses, operations excellence is a strategic weapon to many. Symbiosis Institute of Operations Management, Nasik, a forerunner in anticipating the criticality that the field of operations beholds, is India's only institute fully dedicated to operations excellence. Under the gamut of Symbiosis International University, SIOM is a sui generis institution established with the mission of empowering and leading operations excellence. True to its mission, SIOM has been fueling the industry with operations professionals churned out of its flagship MBA program in operations management exclusively for engineers since its inception in 2005. Owing to its contributions to the field of operations, SIOM has grown beyond laurels of best industry-related curriculum, and it is all geared up towards Industry 5.0 with inclusion of machine learning, artificial intelligence and IIoT. Providing an excellent industry interface, SIOM, now an operational excellence hub, attracts top recruiters for operations-related profiles. SIOM boasts of its alumni presence and recruiters network in top companies across the sectors, be it manufacturing, logistics, retail, e-commerce, hospitality, banking and financial services, consultancy, pharmaceutical, and many more. Surmounting credibility by corporate recruiters is an outcome of holistic and multidisciplinary engagement of students, be it technical expertise, leadership values, or social sensibility initiatives, strategically woven in overall learning environment. Backed with robust project-based learning, Harvard simulations, case studies, research orientation and strategic industry interface through research conference, guest lectures, HR Summit, Operations Summit Tatva, TEDx, and 2 internships. The students are all geared up to take on the challenges of rapidly evolving technological capabilities and value chain complexities, the critical areas of concern for every organization today. SIOM, with intent of knowledge dissemination, offers corporate training programs, customized certifications and consultancy services in the area of operations. Some of our past and current beneficiaries include multinational corporations like GE, GSK and many more. Connect to us for anything and everything related to operations.
SIOM pulsates with the conviction that future CEOs and industry leadership will emerge from operations and supply chain domain, and we feel responsible towards it. This citadel of learning and competency development is exclusively for working executives, MBA aspirants, and the corporates. We act as catalysts to fuel their careers and of course develop operations competencies within organizations. This love for our niche has developed key result area which will impact your triple bottom lines very, very positively. A perfect symbiosis of industry and academia. SIOM is one-stop shop for everyone who is excited about operations management. I invite you to SIOM not just to fuel your talent supply chain, but also to engage with us on your operations expertise and experiences. Come, let's engage.
Connect to the best in operations. Engage with SIOM for operations excellence.
Good morning. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Yeah.
Professor
So,
Altay has already joined.
yeah. So, good morning, everyone. I welcome all the participants for this Editor's Choice program. Symbiosis Institute of Operations Management, Nashik, takes pleasure in bringing you the third webisode of the Editor's Choice. This is a platform for deliberations by editors from reputed journals. Today we have with us Professor Nezih Altay from DePaul University, who pioneers in research in the field of operations and supply chain management. But before we hear him, let me introduce Dr. Vandana Sonavne, Director SIOM, who would make the opening remarks. Dr. Vandana Sonavne has a rich experience in spanning over 27 years of corporate academics and consulting. Her exemplary work in curriculum development focused on continually evolving the competency requirement of the industry culminated into shaping of niche institute in field of operations management that SIOM stands for today and speedily evolving into the center of operations excellence. Under her leadership, SIOM bagged best industry interface and best industry oriented curriculum every year since 2009, and this year SIOM received the prestigious Education Excellence Award 2018 by Confederation of International Accreditation Commission Forum in Delhi. She is recipient of a Distinguished Service Award for her contribution in fostering management research on the CII India Women's Network Council. She received Indian Leadership Award for Education Excellence by All India Achievers Foundation and the Outstanding B School Director Award in 2019. She is on National Board of SME Chamber of India. On the research front, she has more than 20 publications in international journals. Under the guidance of SIOM, under her guidance, SIOM contributed to meaningful research through work in humanitarian logistics, project management, sustainability solutions during Mammoth Kumbh Mela at Nashik. She has led the number of projects on humanitarian logistics, such as Project Shuddhi, on the usage of biodigesters using the Kumbh Mela, and Project Sanchar with the Nashik SIOM police. I now hand over the session to Dr. Vandana Sonavne for her opening remarks.
Thank you. Very good morning to everyone. Am I audible, Dr. Arun Kumar?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the people who have joined across the globe. Namaste from India to all of you. It is my immense pleasure to welcome you to the third episode of Editor's Choice. As we go ahead planning and hosting this particular event, we are seeing more and more, people getting interested into it. So we have a great lineup of speakers, of course, to come forward when we join you back in the next month again after this particular episode. So immense pleasure to welcome all of you. As I said earlier, COVID has seen so many webinars and webisodes and digital events happening all across, but I think we need to do what is very, very meaningful, and for faculty, researchers, and educationists, nothing can be more important than research as such. So SIM takes pride in hosting this event, particularly because of our, dream that editors, research writers come together on a single platform and have conversations, ask questions, voice out their deepest hunches that they have while publishing papers. Yeah. We also wanted to part away or share enthusiasm with our with the researchers and academicians,
and act as catalysts to help them find their own unique role in contribution through research as such. That is why this whole effort and hosting of this very, very new event called as Editor's Choice. Uh, uh, I'm very, very happy to welcome Professor Nezih Altay. Of course, a good friend, and he is known as a disaster guy, right? Why we call him a disaster guy is because of his keen interest and passion in researching and understanding humanitarian disasters from humanitarian point of view. There are so many processes, there are so many areas in disaster management that are not really explored or and focused. I remember discussing very early with him on services operations, and he was so passionate about that. And of course now with his great research in humanitarian operations logistics, I think it is really meaningful research in the true sense as such. So welcome to this episode of Editor's Choice. I have always believed, and I want to share this again and again, that editors are designers of better knowledge, better communicators, yeah, and they design the design that they have in mind for your publications, for your research ideas, is the learning that we wish to have through this Editor's Choice. So welcome again, and welcome Professor Nezih Altay. I'm sure we are all going to gain a lot through this particular session of yours. Thank you so much, and please enjoy the learning. Over to you, Dr. Manatkar. Yeah. Dr. Manatkar, can you hear me?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Please.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am, for your remarks. As a researcher, who wouldn't want guidance for writing and publishing good research papers? Without any further delay, let me introduce to you our expert for this third webisode, Professor Nezih Altay. Dr. Nezih Altay is a professor of supply chain management and faculty director of MS in Supply Chain Management program at Drihas College of Business of DePaul University. He holds a BS degree in chemical engineering from Boğaziçi University in Istanbul, Turkey, MBA from University of Texas Pan American, and PhD from Texas A&M University. As an experienced and highly qualified teacher scholar, Dr. Altay has been teaching all aspects of the supply chain and operations management since 1999 to executives, MBAs, and undergraduates around the world. His research specializes in humanitarian supply chain, disruption management, after-sale service. He has published his research in leading academic journals and presented in national and international arenas. He also co-edited 2 books, Service Parts Management, Demand Forecasting and Inventory Control in the year 2011, Advances in Managing Humanitarian Operations 2016, both published by Springer. He currently serves as a co-editor in chief of the Journal of Humanitarian Logistics and Supply Chain Management and senior editor of Production and Operations Management. Dr. Altay is a Fulbright scholar and Resilience Research Fellow at Technical University, Delft in Netherlands. He also is a research partner at the Research Institute on Leadership Operations in Humanitarian Aid at Kuhn Logistics University in Hamburg. In 2009, for his contribution to the field of humanitarian logistics, Dr. Altay received Academic and Research Accomplishment Award from the American Logistics Aid Network. So I now hand over the session to Dr. Altay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. and team, for inviting me to this beautiful webinar series. It's great to be with you guys again, even though it's virtually. Several years ago, what year was that? I can't remember now. I visited SIOM in Pune and Nashik, and I was extremely happy with my visit over there. Your students are wonderful students, and they're lucky to have you guys as a team teaching them. So without further ado, if you don't mind me sharing my screen, I'm going to start with the presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I will be talking about conducting and publishing meaningful research. And again, thank you for giving this opportunity to me. I'm honored to be with you all today. Good morning to you and good evening to me, I guess. I'm here with my, I wear multiple hats, and I'm here wearing my hat of editor. And as it was mentioned, I am the co-chief editor or co-editor-in-chief, I guess, of Journal of Humanitarian Logistics and Supply Chain Management. That's a very long name, so I'm going to refer it to as Journal of Humanitarian Logistics. And I'm also senior editor of the Disaster Management Department in the Production Operations Management Journal and FT50 Journal. So first, I want to start with giving you a little bit of my background. Some of you already know me from my visit to SIOM, but for those of you who don't know me, I have an engineering undergrad. I met a lot of Indian friends actually in the United States in the business school who have engineering undergrad. So it's not unusual to start in engineering and then find your way to business. Then I received an MBA and did a PhD in operations management. My doctoral thesis topic was basically algorithm development work on capacitated joint replenishment problem. I developed a mixed integer programming model and a algorithm to solve that. At the time, it was a big mathematical challenge, but other than that, I wasn't really sure why I was doing that. The topic was given to me by my PhD advisor, and I went with it. And but that's one of the reasons I think I didn't like research earlier in my career. In my early career, I did lot sizing and spare parts research. Why spare parts? Because I had a great professor at Texas A&M who passed away recently, and he actually mentioned how spare parts are challenging in one of his doctoral seminars. And I got that as a challenge. I received that as a challenge and started doing spare parts research. That was interesting to me. And the lot sizing research was an extension of my dissertation. So as I said, I didn't like research that much, I think, because I always saw it as a chore, but I loved teaching. So that's why I became an academic, because of teaching. While I was working on my dissertation, my wife and I, we were in Turkey, in Istanbul in 1999. Actually, she wasn't my wife at the time. We went to Turkey to get married. And Istanbul, outside of Istanbul, there was an earthquake, 7.2 Richter scale. 17,000 people lost their lives. And we survived, luckily, thank God. And that changed my life. That experience changed my life. I came back to Texas A&M, finished my PhD, graduated in 2001. And then I started teaching myself disaster management. I read about 3,000 abstracts and papers. And I started basically conducting research that alleviates human suffering. Initially, I started with disaster management research, and then it evolved into development work, even human trafficking work. And I basically started doing exclusively this research. I stopped doing lot sizing research. I stopped doing spare parts research. And now I love research. I actually enjoy research a lot because I believe that I'm changing some things. I believe that I have an actual impact When I developed that mixed integer programming algorithm, I think 10 people cited that work, because it was very, very specific. And in my opinion, it didn't have meaning, or it didn't have impact. So that's why I wanted to, when Dr. Sonwane reached out to me and said, what do you want to talk about? I really wanted to talk about doing meaningful research. So what is meaningful research then? What does that mean? To me, I'm going to tell you what it means to me. To me, it means the combination of three things: passionate research, compassionate research, and impactful research. What do I mean with passionate research? Well, you should do something you love. In the United States, they say a lot of people who are lucky enough to work in a job that they really, really enjoy, they say like, oh, they pay me for my hobby. So if you find something that you really, really love, whether it's teaching or research or both, you will be going to work with fun. You will be going to work with pleasure. Never in my life I posted on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, thank God it's Friday. Oh my God, it's Monday. Because for me, work is 7 days a week. I work over the weekends. I enjoy writing papers on humanitarian problems or reading papers on humanitarian problems. So find what you love. It doesn't have to be humanitarian research. Maybe you love finance. Maybe you love investments. That's okay. Find what you love and research what you love. Please don't let research become a chore. Don't start your career if you're at the beginning of your career like I did. So what is compassionate research? Compassionate research is about empathy. Have empathy and think about other people. We live in a world that is interconnected. So if I'm selfish and I only do research about my situation to improve my situation, eventually that stops working because I am connected to other people. And whether the other people are my neighbors next door or my colleagues in India or in Turkey, I'm connected to people. This world is not a singular thing. I mean, your world is not a singular thing, I think. So have empathy and understand what big problems in our world are. For example, the upcoming biggest problems is hunger, because we have 7 billion people in this world, and it is forecasted that our world population will hit 10 billion very, very soon. So the question is, how are we going to feed those extra 3 billion people? A lot of people are working on that problem. But, some people are even growing artificial muscle tissue, like artificial meat and all that stuff. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a geneticist. I am a supply chain management professor. I understand supply chain management and I understand operations management. So I'm going to approach those problems from with that lens. So connect your research to your passion, whatever your passion was. Connect it to these compassionate issues, compassionate problems. And next slide, I'm going to explain where to find them if you're not sure how to find compassionate operational problems or where they are. And lastly, the third part is the impact part. So to have impact with your research, you have to collaborate with people who are working in the field. Whether those, in my case, those are NGOs, United Nations agencies, and if you're in investments, Wall Street or the Indian market, Indian stock market, etc. So collaborate with people who are doing this stuff in the field, because then your research can have impact in the field. But you can also have impact by informing with your research policymakers. You can inform government agencies on these problems. For example, I work on with a colleague of mine. We work on labor trafficking, and our purpose is understanding the impact of labor trafficking on companies and inform the companies how financially they're being affected by labor trafficking allegations. Another research is about sex trafficking, and we're talking about recidivism behavior, why women in the sex work tend to go back to that work, and how can you break that cycle. And there, our purpose is inform the policymakers, especially law enforcement agencies and government, so that we can break that cycle. And the minimum thing you can do with your research is actually create awareness. When I started doing disaster management research, I realized that, number one, I didn't know how disaster agencies work, and that's because I didn't read anything about it. So when we are hit by a flood or an earthquake, we expect the government to show up, or the army to show up, or the Red Cross to show up and help us. But there is a lot of things going on in the background, logistically, supply chain wise, and it is difficult work. So once I started learning about disaster management, I appreciated them a lot more. And then I started teaching. I created a class at DePaul and started teaching humanitarian supply chain management as an elective. My purpose with that was twofold. One, I wanted to relay what I'm learning to other people. And number two, I wanted to create awareness among people. They too should understand how difficult that work is, and we should not take it for granted. So the combination, the center right there, the center of passionate, compassionate, and impactful research is, in my opinion, meaningful research. So find your passion, what you love, have empathy, connect that passion to big problems, and work with people in the field, inform government policy, and create awareness. That's meaningful and impactful research, in my opinion. Where do I find those big problems? Well, the shortest cut answer is United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, UN SDGs. If you just Google UN SDGs, you will immediately go to the UNDP website, United Nations Development Program website. So in 2015, originally in 2000, the UN came up with the Millennium Development Goals. And they had a deadline, 2015. And in 2015, because part of those goals, some of those goals were very, very successful. For example, extreme poverty. When the Millennium Development Goals were started, there were about 1.5 billion, with a B, people living in extreme poverty in the world. And with work on this problem, in 15 years, the deadline was 2015, we were able to reduce that number to 838 million, I believe, 836 million, something like that, 800 plus. So in 2015, they came up with new goals, 17 goals. Their target date is 2030. So what happens with these goals? Companies, governments, universities, research institutions, everybody is supposed to be working on these big problems and try to develop solutions for them. You will not save the world by yourself. I will not save the world by myself. But if I make a little bit of contribution, and then you can take over from there, and you make a contribution, and then somebody else takes over from there, and step by step, we move ahead. So these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, it starts with no poverty. So poverty alleviation is still goal number 1. And then it includes hunger, health, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, or access to clean water and sanitation, sustainability, climate action, all kinds of different goals. So whether you're a electrical engineer working on energy, clean energy, goal number 7 applies to you, for example, or you're an economist, goal number 8 can apply to you, or you're a production engineer, goal number 9 can apply to you. So I have no doubt that you will find something in these 17 goals, SDGs, that actually matches with your passion. So then you can dig in and learn more about those SDGs. If you go to the UNDP website, there's more explanations and sub-targets. So it is a easy shortcut way of finding what the big problems are. How do I connect these UN SDGs to my passion? So insert your passion there. How do I connect UN SDGs to, I don't know, investments or marketing, or in my case, supply chain management. So my area is supply chain management. If I'm only looking at this from a supply chain management researcher perspective, I just listed, what popped in my mind in terms of some research areas. The biggest chat these days, the biggest chatter in the business world is ESG risk. Harvard, Cornell, Yale, business schools, they all developed ESG risk classes or finance courses on ESG risk. And what is ESG risk? Environmental risk, social risk, and governance risk. So the social is very important for millennials and Gen Z. They actually now look for companies that make a social impact, even when they're looking for jobs. So these companies are now really, really paying attention to ESG risk. And because of the social part of ESG risk, CSR became a hot topic. When I first heard about CSR, honestly, CSR was a window dressing in a lot of companies. What do you do for CSR? Oh, once a year we volunteer for Habitat for Humanity, or we collect money for our, I don't know, like some little charity in our city, or we turn off the lights because we want to save energy when we are leaving the offices. That was CSR, and CSR actually went a lot further than that. It's much more comprehensive, much more impactful in big companies. So what is the role of CSR in supply chain management? What is the interaction between CSR and supply chain management is a very interesting question. Then coordination is a big issue in terms of supply chain management. How do you coordinate NGOs, government organizations, and companies so that there is some impactful messaging and programming being done? Improving productivity of micro enterprises in global supply chains. This is a very, very valid issue for India, especially because a big part of Indian population is self-employed. They have micro enterprises. They may be selling, milk, or they may be selling some food item, or they may be making textiles in their home. But ultimately, that milk, that textile, everything somehow ends up in the global supply chain. So they are part of the supply chain, but we ignore them as legitimate suppliers. So how can we make them legitimate suppliers? How can we incorporate them into larger supply chains? That's a big question mark for me. Other issues I mentioned earlier, labor trafficking, for example, or labor exploitation. Migrant workers, also again in India, that's a big problem, or big, not a problem as an issue, but big research question rather. With COVID-19, for example, when migrant workers wanted to go back to their homes, they could not because of the lockdowns. And unfortunately, they were not also making money because businesses were closed. So they were stuck in between. They couldn't go back home, and there was no job to go. They were stuck in between a hard place and a rock, basically. So, and migrant workers is not just an issue in India. In China is a huge issue. United States even. A big chunk of agricultural product in the United States is collected by migrant workers that come from South America. So the role of migrant workers in COVID-19, or the management of COVID-19, and also migrant workers are typically frequently exploited. Their exploitation, these are big problems also in supply chains. What are the consequences of Industry 4.0? I am a big fan of Industry 4.0. I mean, I love AI, blockchain and all that stuff. But on the other hand, there's a bad part of Industry 4.0 we just ignore. When you bring in AI, when you bring in robots, people lose their jobs. They replace jobs. So what happens to those people? if I replace, for example, in Bangladesh, biggest industry in Bangladesh is textiles. And textile companies are getting ready to replace all these workers with SOBOTs, SEWBOT, SOBOTs. These SOBOTs basically make, you know, what the people are sewing, like sewing jeans, sewing shirts, or whatever. And the robots can actually do that. So millions of people will be displaced in terms of from their jobs, and they're underskilled. So if the whole textile industry replaces them with robots, and the biggest industry in the country is textiles, where are they going to work? And here comes the gender equality issue, because women will be affected improportionally larger, you know, because of this, because a big chunk of textile workers in Bangladesh are women. So they are the ones who are going to lose their jobs. Alternatives to cost minimization objective in math models. As I mentioned, I started my career as a math modeler, and always there was one objective, and that was minimize cost. So the objective function was always minimize cost. And cost minimization as a business problem is great, but when you look at it from a humanitarian perspective, cost minimization is not a good objective function. So we need to find new objective functions and change the way we do math modeling. And that's for my math modeler friends. And lastly, closed loop supply chains, sustainability. These are all, you know, things that popped in my mind when I just thought about supply chain and UN SDGs. You know, if you sit down for an hour and think about what is your passion and how do you connect to UN SDGs, I have no doubt you will come up with a bigger list than me. Next, I want to talk about, you know, conducting meaningful research, and I want to mention 4 things. Recently, you know, Luc van Wassenhove is a professor emeritus. He retired last year at INSEAD. He's still very, very active, and he wrote a couple of papers on this issue. One, the meaningful research needs to be empirically grounded. So I'm not saying don't do, you know, conceptual research, theoretical research, but meaningful research should work with real data and empirical data, so that it can have at least some impact in the field, right? Remember, I mentioned you can have impact in the field. You can inform policy. You can do that with conceptual pieces, and you can also create awareness. But empirically grounded research can actually tell the people in the field how they're doing or how can they improve their productivity. Because of that, you need to do your research in collaboration with organizations on the field. In India, you guys are very, very lucky because there are thousands and thousands of NGOs active, and you have access to them. You can easily gain access to them and collect field data. So that is something a little bit more difficult here in the United States because of the competition between scholars like me. We all go to the same organizations, and the organizations, to be honest, are up to here. They were like, we don't want to see an academic anymore. So do your research in collaboration and with people who are actually boots on the ground, who are doing these things. And do your research on questions that are relevant to practice. There are some research questions that are abstract. I'm not saying, I have nothing against abstract research, but also I am the co-editor of Journal of Humanitarian Logistics. Abstract research for Journal of Humanitarian Logistics doesn't make much sense. We want to make an impact. We want to inform the people on the field. So we are looking for research questions that are relevant to people who practice this stuff. And also create shared value for all actors involved, including the field workers and including you. Most of us, including me, make the same mistake. We go to an NGO, we want their data because we want to publish in a good journal, and we publish our article and say bye-bye. So basically, at that point, the third time, the NGO will say, you know what, we're not sharing our data anymore because we don't get anything out of this. We're wasting our time teaching you what we do, and you don't even tell us how to improve our operations. So when you create your research, create shared value. You publish your research, but also give them something they can use. If you can do that, then they will actually open their arms and start sharing more information with you. So in my opinion, conducting meaningful research goes through these four things: empirically grounded, in collaboration with NGOs or organizations that are relevant, and questions that are relevant to practice, and create shared value. This webinar series is about publishing in high quality journals. So I'm going to come now, we talked about meaningful research. I'm going to come down now to how do I publish this meaningful research in good journals. First of all, know your journal rankings. Journal rankings change from country to country, even university to university. In the United States, we don't have a country list, for example. But big universities or R1 schools, Research 1 schools, usually either use FT50 or the UT Dallas list. In my university, which is a 50-50 school, teaching and research is equally valued, we basically created our own list. I'm not happy with it, but it is what it is. So my philosophy has always been publish in journals that makes you mobile, because you never know where life will take you. And especially we are a family of 2 academics. So it is very difficult to balance that, and you always think like, are we gonna move again and all that? So I wanna be mobile. And if my university list or department list is limited, I'm not gonna pay attention to it. I'm gonna pay attention to these big lists like the ABS list or the FT50 or the UT Dallas, because those journals will make me mobile. A's and B's, why is this important? A's and B's get cited and recognized. And again, it comes back to mobility. It comes back to, I want to mention here something. When I started my career, I think it was my first year or second year as an assistant professor, I was enjoying teaching so much. And one of the more senior professors came to me and we started chatting. And I mentioned him that, I don't enjoy research that much, but I enjoyed teaching a lot. And he said, you need to make a choice, because good teaching, solid teaching will make you a star at your university, but good research, solid research will make you a global star. So your fame as a teacher will stay in your university. There are exceptions to that, of course. There are teachers who go around and teach teachers. But in terms of research, the whole world will read your papers. It's a very different ballgame. So citations are important for that reason. A's and B journals get cited and recognized. C journals, not so much. I have papers in C journals. They may get 1 or 2 citations, but that's about it. There are exceptions to the rule. Some journals are very, very specific, like my journal, Journal of Humanitarian Logistics, and papers in this journal get cited because other humanitarian researchers read our journal. So you will find these very specific area journals that are probably exception to that rule. I'm not going to go into the lists, FT50, ABS, and all that stuff, because I know Dr. Rameshwar Dubey already in his webinar went in detail with these lists. But know your journal lists, know your journal rankings, understand which journals are top journals, and I can count them with 2 hands. There are not too many top journals, and then familiarize yourself with the scope of the journal. One of the biggest problems I have as an editor is about probably 1 out of every 5 papers that are submitted to my journal are not humanitarian research. They are green manufacturing or even aerospace stuff. I don't know why people submit that stuff to my journal. Sometimes I wonder, they don't even look at probably the title of the journal. So I receive really, these random papers, and they get desk rejected, basically immediately rejected for improper fit. So familiarize yourself with the scope of the journal. Some journals are like Journal of Operations Management is really big on empirical research. But if you have an optimization math modeling type of paper, JOM is not a good fit for you. So understand what the scope of the journal is. How do I do that? Well, you can go to the journal's website to begin with. But also, more importantly, you should actually look at some recent papers published in that journal. Look at the editorial members. For example, just today, earlier today when I was working on a paper, I came across this journal called World Development. And the paper I'm writing is about development aid. So I was like, maybe that, world development sounds like it's a good target for my research. And I went to the journal website and I looked at the editorial board members. Every editorial board member is a political science international relations professor. I don't think supply chain management articles will be a good fit to that journal. So that's what you need to do. Understand the nuances between journals. There are a lot of operations management journals. For example, IJPE, IJPR, International Journal of Production Research, International Journal of Production Economics, two very different journals in terms of scope. So the difference is not huge. They're production journals, but one publishes a lot of Industry 4.0 technology type of articles, and the other one is a little bit more wider scope. For example, in IJPE, you will see a lot of humanitarian papers. They even had, I believe it was 2010, they even had a special issue on humanitarian papers. Top journals tend to be generalists. So Academy of Management Review, Management Science, Journal of Operations Management tend to be generalists rather than specific area journals. So specific area journals also are rarely rated A journals, rated as A journals. And the reason for that is generalist, as you can expect that a generalist journal is getting cited a lot more. So their impact factors are a lot higher. And unfortunately, there are still, I'm saying unfortunately, I'm going to explain why. Unfortunately, there are still universities, schools, departments who pay attention impact factors. Impact factor is only one way of measuring the impact of a journal. It's not the only way. For example, Journal of Humanitarian Logistics doesn't have an impact factor. We're not listed in the SCI impact factors. However, we have another advantage. The logistics cluster, the UN logistics cluster, is subscribed to our journal. So if it is my journal, Journal of Humanitarian Logistics will get you there. Can you hear me? Because I see a unstable.
Yes,
unstable.
Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Okay, perfect. But I do not know many humanitarian logisticians who read management science. So the idea is, again, meaningful research, impactful research, right? So top journals are great. They're generalists. They from an academic perspective, scholarly perspective, they have big impact. But if you want to have impact on the field, then you need to do something additional. I'm not saying don't publish in POM, the POM journal or JOM. I'm not saying that, but you need to do an additional step, which is what? Which is, have a blog and translate your research, what you found in your research, into that blog so that the field workers can read your blog. Share your blog with them. So that way, the saying of ivory tower, academics are stuck in their ivory tower. That way we can actually be Rapunzel, and basically the blog will be our hair down the ivory tower so that we can give access to that information. to others and create awareness. So let's talk about how do I get there. I think this slide probably is the most important slide in my presentation. How do I get there? How do I publish in big journals? Number one, have a strategy. Don't act randomly. Have a portfolio. For example, I cannot claim that I am a big stellar publisher. I reside in a 50-50 school. We don't have a PhD program. I don't have access to PhD students. I mostly work by myself or with colleagues outside of the university. I'm the only humanitarian researcher, humanitarian supply chain researcher in my department, in my college. So I do have A papers, I do have B papers, I do have C papers. That's what I mean with a portfolio approach. Not every paper you write will go to FD50. If you're lucky that way, you should be actually presenting the next one. I will listen to that presentation. But have a portfolio. Think about your portfolio. And earlier in my career, I was very, very opportunistic, basically following special issues. But opportunism is not a good strategy. It gets you only so far. And I know this presentation sounds like, in Turkish, we have a saying, what do you call it? A cloth maker cannot make his own clothes. They can make good clothes for others, but they cannot make their own clothes. So, or we sometimes say, teachers should, teachers in my country say, do what I tell you to do, but don't do what I do. My father-in-law was an internal surgeon, very good doctor. And he used to tell everyone, you should not smoke, smoking kills. And he used to smoke. So I'm telling you certain things, but I have not followed them in my earlier career. I think I'm much more experienced in that sense that I changed my ways. So opportunism is not a good strategy. Have a portfolio. If you don't know where to start, how to start, conduct a SWOT analysis on yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? What are the opportunities and threats out there? And be honest with yourself. That's the hardest part. For example, I'm not a methodologist. I went through this exercise myself. I conducted a SWOT analysis, right? And I realized that I'm not an expert of any method. I'm not a methodologist. But I understand and know the literature. And I am very, very good in finding problems that are important. Then what I do is I connect with people who are, let's say that particular paper needs a math programmer or a game theorist. Then I find the game theorist and I team up with them. So learn what your strengths are, learn what your weaknesses are, and find the people who are gonna cover those weaknesses. And then look at the opportunities and threats. What do I mean with threats? When I worked on my dissertation, as I mentioned, my advisor gave me that topic. My advisor also told me that I should code in Fortran because he knew Fortran. And we're talking about year 2000. Fortran was gone already, but I actually had to learn Fortran and code 5,000 lines of code in Fortran. Once I was done with my thesis, it was gone. It was dead because nobody was using that language again. So if you are a deterministic math programmer and the field is moving clearly to stochastic optimization, that's a threat for you. You need to either learn stochastic optimization or find someone who understands stochastic optimization. So that's what I mean with what are the opportunities and threats out there. What are the opportunities right now? Industry 4.0, everybody talks about it, AI, deep learning, blockchain. How can you bring those topics to your research? If you're in marketing, what does blockchain mean to you? If you're in human resources, what does AI mean to you? But those are the opportunities out there right now. The famous resource-based view, RBV, also applies to having a research strategy. So remember those strengths and weaknesses. So you can develop those strengths and weaknesses by educating yourself on these topics and basically create your own capabilities. But always remember, These capabilities are dynamic. In time, you need to update yourself, right? If you're still teaching your classes with, you know, overhead projectors and the plastic thing is all yellow, I had a professor like that, you probably should update yourself. So that's the idea. And those dynamic capabilities become competitive priorities. So you prioritize in your own research what makes you competitive. Build a network. That's, I think, in my opinion, this is the most important thing. You cannot save this world by yourself. You cannot write good papers by yourself. Maybe you're an excellent researcher. Even then, doing the methodology, writing the introduction, packaging the paper, everything takes so much time. By the time you write one paper, your competitors or your colleagues will be writing 10 papers. So build a network, find the right people. Don't make the mistake of, you know, going with your buddies, your friends. Just because they're your friends, that doesn't mean they're the right people. So if you need a game theory person, find a game theory person. If you need a person who really knows the literature, find that literature person and reach out to them, email them. More importantly, attend conferences. Now, unfortunately, you know, we're doing virtual conferences, but when we go back, hopefully one day, when we go back to face-to-face conferences, there is nothing more important than, you know, shaking hands, introducing yourself, and, you know, have a coffee or tea or a beverage of your choice. That connection is much more important than everything else. The other thing is create situational awareness. You need to learn, you need to know what's going on in your field. And attending conferences, again, is very important. But I've met some people, I'm not going to mention countries or, you know, places. I met some colleagues who come to the conferences like tourists. They never attend the sessions. They go out, explore the city, have fun, and then go back. Basically, you know, from a scholarly perspective, zero development. From a touristic perspective, they actually see the cities much more than I do, because I don't even leave the conference hotel because I'm meeting people, I'm attending sessions. Why am I attending sessions? Because I want to learn what others are doing, what their research is all about. You can see how research moves from areas to areas by attending conferences. That's what I mean with situational awareness. If you cannot attend conferences because, you know, it's money, right? It's expensive to fly to, you know, overseas and all that stuff. Read the latest research. Every single publisher, good publisher, has a TOC alert system, table of contents alert system. Sign up to that. All you need to do is enter your email. That's all. When the new issue comes out, they send you the table of contents. At the very least, you can see the titles of the papers that are being published right now. If something is interesting, then go to the website and read the abstract. You don't need to read the whole paper to understand where, you know, to gain situational awareness, but at least read the abstract. And most importantly, create synergies between your research, your teaching, and your service. I added service. I thought about, you know, should I add service or not? I added service because in my university, community service is very important. It's part of the tenure process because we are a Vincentian institution. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but our university has a mission of community service. So from my perspective, from my research, it was easier because I do research with people in the field, in humanitarian field. So I combine my research with my service and my teaching with my research because I also teach humanitarian supply chains at DePaul. When you create these synergies, new things come out because a student asks a question and you go like, that's a very interesting question. I should actually write a paper about this. Or when you're working with, when you're doing service with organizations, they ask you something, you know, Professor, how do we do that? And you realize that it hasn't been researched in the literature. So these synergies actually work magic. And finally, review papers for your target journals. Now, initially, if you have never done a review work, referee work, that's hard work. I wouldn't recommend you to start with, Management Science, Journal of Operations Management and all that. Start with, C-level journals if you want. Learn how to do proper referee work. I hate it when a referee writes for a paper, I don't like this paper, or I think this paper is not good. That's not constructive criticism. Our job is to help the authors of these papers to improve their paper, to make that paper better, and so that we can publish it. I don't like this paper is not constructive criticism. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't inform the editor. So learn how to do good referee work, and then reach out to editors and say, hey, I want to referee for your journal. Here's my CV. Here are the publications that I have. I would like to be on your referee database. And we always look for referees. It's so hard to find good referees. That's why the same handful of people referee every paper. So please volunteer and do referee work. So if you do all this, have a strategy, understand your strengths and weaknesses, and build your capabilities, build your network, understand where the research is going, there is no reason why you shouldn't be publishing in top journals. How do I submit to top journals? If you're not sure about the fit of your paper for that particular journal you have in mind, email the editor. Email the abstract of the paper and say, hey, dear editor, I have this paper in mind. I would like to send it to your journal, but I want to check whether it fits your scope or not. Editors are not monsters. We're friendly people. We will email you back, and if not in 5 minutes, in a couple of days, and we'll say, no, sorry, it doesn't fit our journal, or yeah, it's a great paper. It sounds like a great abstract. Please send it to us, submit through the system and all that. Share your paper before you send to a journal. Share your paper with trusted colleagues and get their feedback. Why am I saying trusted colleagues? Believe it or not, in this industry that we have, people steal ideas. So I wouldn't send the paper to random people. If it's a very good paper, especially if you think that it's a very good paper, send it to a couple of trusted colleagues and ask their opinion. Understand how to position your paper. Packaging is 50% of the work. A lot of us can do analysis. That's our job. We're academics, right? A lot of us can do analysis, but how do you present that paper in a way that pops out, that really highlights the contribution, is a skill. That skill doesn't come automatically. It took me years to develop that skill. And the only way you can develop that skill is by writing more and more papers. And when you do that, you will get rejected a lot, but it's part of the game. Know your methodology inside out, because your methodology, for a top journal especially, your methodology should be bulletproof. Know the literature. We receive so many papers where citations are random. Like when you're reading the paper, people cited XYZ, and you're thinking like, why do they even talk about XYZ? Because their paper is about something else. So know the literature. You don't need to cite you don't need to have 100 citations in your paper. Cite the ones that are actually right on, important, relate to your paper one-to-one. Discussion is not a summary of results. A lot of people make that mistake. They have a figure showing the results, and then the discussion is basically the summary of that figure. The discussion should explain why or how those results came out. What happened so that those results came out? What do they mean? Are they generalizable? If I change them a little bit, but if I change my inputs a little bit, like sensitivity analysis, how much do my results change? Are they robust results? So that's a discussion. And it's a very important part of the paper, and it's usually papers who get rejected do a lousy job with discussion. Your findings should be generalizable in top journals especially, and submit unique work. And here I'm giving you an example based on my experience. myself, I made my fame with a literature review paper published in 2006 in EJOR. And after that, I don't know how many literature reviews have been published on humanitarian stuff. But look at the literature. If you have a literature review paper in mind, and the last literature review on that topic has been published last year, it's probably not a good idea to write another literature review because, you know, since last year, how many more papers have been published? But if you can find a corner of that field that hasn't been explored and you want to focus on that corner, then you can write a literature review paper. So submit unique work. Don't submit repetitive work. Repetitive work only gets published in C journals. Fix the language, please, please, please. You know, in India, you're mostly lucky. A lot of my Indian friends speak amazing English, the Queen's English. However, there are still some friends, whether it's India or Turkey or China or even the United States, that, you know, their English is problematic. So that is not a weakness that you cannot fix. I think what happens when you send a paper with broken English or bad English, with typos especially, or bad grammar, it rubs the referees the wrong way. Because remember that referees are volunteers. They're actually stopping their own work, their own paid work, and read your paper as a volunteer. They don't get paid for it. You know, so I referee about 15 papers a year. That's an amazing number. I'm sorry, because most people referee 2-3 papers a year. This is outside of my editorial work. I referee for other journals. So how do I do that? Well, sometimes I don't have dinner with my family because I'm reading a paper. I'm refereeing a paper. So respect my time. Respect the referee's time. If you send them a paper full of grammatical errors, typological errors, and all that stuff, they basically immediately reject it. They basically say, I don't want to even read this paper because these people didn't even take care of the language. And it's easy to take care of the language. There are editing companies. There are so many of them. They can actually, you can pay a couple of hundred, you know, I think $100 or $200 in US. I don't know how much it costs in India or Turkey or somewhere else. I bet it's cheaper, but they can fix your English. So fix the language before you submit the paper, and it makes a whole lot of difference. Now, this is my last slide, final words. What I would like to share you based on my experience, do not get discouraged from rejections. Everybody gets rejected. You know, the biggest names in the field get rejected. So the issue though is when you get rejected, use the feedback to improve the paper before you submit it somewhere else. That would be my strategy. I know one colleague of mine, he's a star publisher. He has a completely different strategy and it kind of works for him. What he does is when a paper gets rejected, he immediately submits it as is to another journal because he doesn't want to waste time. I don't like that strategy because I look at the referee feedback as an improvement opportunity. So every time my paper gets rejected, it gets better and better, right? So, you know, I have one paper that got rejected after 4 revisions. I worked on it for a year and a half after submission. After 4 revisions, we got rejected because we couldn't satisfy the reviewers. But I took the feedback to heart, worked on that paper, improved it, and submitted to another journal. First round, it got accepted. So use that opportunity. Reviewers are not your enemy. Do not pick fights with reviewers. That's a losing battle. And I have friends and students do that. Oh, this reviewer is stupid. Oh, this reviewer doesn't know what he's talking about or she's talking about. That's a dead end. Ultimately that reviewer decides whether your paper will get accepted or not. So control your ego. Avoid polemic, avoid fights, be respectful. Same thing if you're a reviewer. Do not ever, as a reviewer, say, this is a stupid argument. remember that you're reading a paper, you're not talking to person in face to face. So maybe you misunderstood the argument, maybe you misunderstood the sentence, but forget about everything. This is a stupid argument is not constructive criticism. So have respect and be respectful, expect respect and be respectful from reviewers. Write good papers. One thing I learned in my career is these damn papers stay out there forever. You know, it's not the good old days where you had to go to the library and punch a card and then look for cards and all that stuff to find an article. With Google and Google Scholar, anyone can find your paper and that paper will stay there forever. So write papers that you are proud of, you can be proud of. I have some papers that I'm not proud of. I don't even put them on my CV because I rather highlight my successes, my big papers. So write good papers. Don't ever pay to publish. That's a mistake in my opinion. Unfortunately, these pay to publish journals are popping like mushrooms everywhere. And you give them $500, $600, and without even going through any decent referee system, it gets published. You know, most people in this sector, in this industry, know those journals. And if you publish in those journals, it basically doesn't look good for you as a researcher. So don't ever pay to publish. The exception to the rule is some A journals, like for example, Journal of Finance, has a submission fee. It's not a publication fee, it's a submission fee. You know, you can still get rejected. But you know, there are a lot of journals coming out of China, unfortunately, that are pay to publish. And there are also, if you just go to Google and type in, banning or list of pay to publish journals and all that stuff, there are some people who track these journals and report them as, banned journals. So it's easy to find them. Lastly, avoid journals that are not widely circulated. There are some publishers, I don't want to name names, but there are some publishers who don't have good circulation. Most libraries don't subscribe to them. Most databases don't subscribe to them. So you can publish in that journal, but nobody will be able to read your article. If they can't read your article, they cannot cite your work. So the unfortunate thing about those journals that are not widely circulated is people can't find your work and read it. So I can go to Google Scholar, I can see a title, but I can't read it because there's no subscription in my university to that journal. So that's all I have for you. I really appreciate your patience with me and your interest. If you have any questions, you can email me later on. I will answer some of the questions tonight. But if you ever have questions and you have a question about the journal, please email me. My email is on the screen, naltay@thepol.edu. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, thank you, sir. Thank you for this meaningful session and on the meaningful research and making us more aware about the humanitarian supply chain aspects, and especially the detailed explanation on as to how to publish in the quality journals, having the research strategy or conducting a SWOT analysis or research-based views or building the network or situational analysis. So all these aspects to be taken into account while publishing the paper has been, covered in a detail. So now we move on to the question and answers round now. We had overwhelming response to this event from the research fraternity. So there are a few questions on that, and I will, some of the questions I will just read out because of some constraint, people could not join for this session. So some of the questions I will read out, and some questions probably we could take online. So, sir, the first question that we have received on this topic is from Dr. Shiba Prasad Pari from Symbiosis Institute of Business Finance. And his question is that nowadays the calamities are going up. And in many cases, multiple catastrophes are happening in the countries. For example, in Turkey, along with COVID, they had earthquake. Then in Lebanon, Beirut, along with the blast, there was pandemic. Even in US, along with COVID, multiple storms in the northeast USA, as well as catastrophic fire and inferno in west coast. So the question is, how can researchers contribute to this kind of a situation to handle such calamities and the multiple catastrophes those are happening around the world?
Sure, thank you. That's a very good question, actually, and Dr. Shiba is a good friend, and he's on to something here, because I do not know much of research that focuses on concurrent disasters. Most of the research, almost all of the research in humanitarian work, focuses on one disaster at a time, and multiple disasters happening back to back, very short time in between. Basically the time in between is so short that there's not enough time for the community to come back to normalcy, right? While they're working to come back, they're reconstructing, recovering, they're hit by another disaster. So most of the literature doesn't look at that. They're looking at singular events. And I think Dr. Shiba is onto something, because that would be valuable research. Whether looking at two disasters happening back to back very quickly, or two concurrent disasters like the COVID and earthquake in Izmir in Turkey. But I'm not talking about, for example, World Food Program attending two disasters that happened at the same time, but one in India, one in Turkey, right? Because World Food Program is designed to operate that way, number one. In that particular scenario, it becomes a question of resource allocation. I have limited resources and there are two disasters, I'm going to allocate resources to them, right? It's a resource allocation problem. But if you look at in the same community, two disasters happening, boom, boom, back to back, then you should be thinking about response capabilities and buffer. Because if you have enough relief items, relief aid in your warehouses to respond to one disaster, and you use up all of it, and the second disaster happens right away, you're basically caught off guard without any tools, right? So there should be some tools or some aid relief left behind for a potential second disaster. And these disasters don't come out of nowhere. I mean, earthquakes do, yes, but when it's monsoon season, everybody expects floods, no? So it's not a surprise. So you can actually forecast them, relatively speaking, and calculate the buffer. But I haven't seen a paper where it calculates the optimal buffer for consequent disasters, whether it's 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever. So it's a very good question. And I think there's a research gap in the literature on that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that answer. And we move on to the next question, which is from Professor Marathe Vikas Ramchandra. So he's from Sinhagad College of Engineering, Solapur. So even though you already covered, I think, do's and don'ts of the research paper, but especially he would like to know about the do nots of the research papers. Writing maybe some focus on that, how to take care of those do nots in the research paper writing.
Yeah, that's a good question too. We talk about do's a lot.
Yeah.
I think the don'ts are don't use the referees to fix your paper. Send a paper that you're proud of that you think is really good. Sometimes we see those, the paper is, how do I put it lightly? Put together without care, right? And it's very clear that the authors are relying on the referees to fix it for them. That's not a referee's job. So send papers that are well done. And then there are I'm not saying that people do this, but there are some no-nos in our field. Don't ever submit the same paper to multiple journals at the same time. That's unethical. It wastes a lot of time of people, and if people find out, you will be banned from journals, and the risk is not worth it. Don't plagiarize or self-plagiarize. A lot of us don't look at self-plagiarism as plagiarism. So, I have a paper that I've written last year. I can take a paragraph from there, or this discussion was, I did a good job with the discussion section. I'm going to copy paste it to this journal, to this article. That also comes out very quickly, because nowadays with Google, you can basically type in the whole sentence and it pops out. And guess what? The Production Operations Management Journal in POM, we started using a service very similar to Turnitin. If you're familiar with Turnitin.
Yeah.
Basically, it's an AI system, and it searches in the internet for sentences, words, and all that stuff, and it gives us, as editors, a percentage score. And if the match is more than 1%, we send the paper back to the authors. So, don't plagiarize, self-plagiarize. Another thing, this is a positive thing. When you receive your referee comments, some referees can be harsh. And I think in the Turkish culture, as well as the Indian culture, we are more humble people. When I was growing up, my mother always used to say, don't brag about yourself, because there's a higher person always. And so I grew up learning not to brag about myself. In the American culture, it's the opposite. They don't count you if you don't brag about yourself. But I think, at least seeing from my Indian friends, the Indian culture is very similar in that sense. We don't necessarily brag about ourselves. We were very humble. That doesn't play well with referees, because they take it as submissive behavior. And if you have a referee that is, harsh, like boom, 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 this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. You have every right to fight it. You have, just stand straight and say, you're wrong because of this, this, this. Now, of course, in my presentation, I said, don't pick a fight with the referees, right? So there are pleasant ways of saying that, instead of, oh no, you're stupid, you don't know what you're talking about. And then, your paper gets rejected. So find a nice language to say that, but you don't need to back down. You don't need to take a step back or anything like that. And again, I learned that the hard way. It took me years to learn that. I was lucky enough to have a mentor in my previous institution. I started my career at University of Richmond, and my mentor and good friend Andy Littrell was the one who told me, "You're very apologetic in your papers. Don't be apologetic." And that changed the results of my papers. My papers started getting accepted left and right, because I wasn't apologetic, because I knew what I was doing. I mean, when you write a paper, when you do the research, you're the expert. You did that research, right? So you should know what you're doing, and you should behave that way. So don't be apologetic, don't be submissive, don't plagiarize. And also, don't try to cut corners. I mean, the publication process is long. If you want to submit a paper or a top journal, it takes 3-4 years. 1 year you work on the paper, or data collection, analysis, and corrections, and all that stuff, writing. Then you submit it. Then it goes through like 2 years of revisions and all that stuff. So you're looking at There is no shortcutting that. Don't try to shortcut. Be patient, be resilient, and yeah, those would be my don'ts.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the detailed explanation on that. And then we move ahead on third question by Disha from Symbiosis Institute of Operations Management, Nashik. So, Disha, are you online? Can you unmute and just ask your question?
Yes, sir. So, hello, sir. Disha this side. And my question to you is, how do we write a strong introduction section that keeps reader engaged and also leads to the flow of the research objective and research question perfectly? So, your views on that, sir.
Thank you, Disha. This is a very good question. Because in my opinion, introduction is the most important part of the paper. I actually spent the most time on my papers writing the introduction. I sometimes spend days writing one page. And I write it, I delete it, I write it, I try different things because you're absolutely right. It needs to connect to the back end of the paper, and it needs to create a really good flow, just like you're writing a crime novel or something. If you were writing a murder mystery, you capture the attention of the reader at the beginning, and until the end they can't even leave the book from their hands, right? So you're absolutely right about that. How do you write that? My strategy, I can tell you my strategy. My strategy is I always start with a problem that I want to solve. So sometimes that problem comes from an article I was reading in Wall Street Journal. And I say like, that's an interesting thing. I wonder how a company does that, right? Or sometimes it's a what do you call it? A documentary I watch. Like my sex trafficking research started with a documentary. I watched the documentary and I was shocked that, slavery today still exists in terms of, the sex industry. And I said, how can that be? I started reading about it. And I said, well, this is an interesting question. If you look at a human being as a commodity in this supply chain, right? Because a lot of these criminals see the women that they sell as a commodity. That for them, it's really not different than a goat or corn or whatever. They don't care. They don't see them as a human being because, these are not even humans themselves. So think about it like a supply chain where the commodity is human, and I approach it from a modeling perspective. And that's how I started thinking about that problem. Now, the introduction is easier to write that way because now you're writing about the problem, right? Why is this a big deal? Why is this important to research? And the rest comes by itself. So some of the easiest papers I wrote, or some of the easiest introductions rather, I wrote are papers when I got inspired by an article or by a film or something like that. The other thing I can recommend is if at your university or in your city, if there is a course or like a certificate program or something on writing, like writing a novel and all that stuff, take a class. It's really worth it because somebody to become a novelist, they have to write a lot of stuff, and they need to know how to capture the interest of the audience, right? Unfortunately, in operations management or optimization or engineering, they never teach us that. Even in the PhD program, they said, okay, when you graduate, you're going to teach people. Okay, am I supposed to take some education classes from the education department? Oh, no, you'll figure it out. So same thing with writing, right? So they said you need to write papers. Okay, do I need to take some writing classes? Oh no. So I would strongly recommend, if you have that opportunity, to take a novel writing class or what do you call it, like opinion writing class, any writing class, I think you will gain a lot from that. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, definitely, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. In the interest of time, we have a last question from Shrimol R, a research scholar, Cochin University of Science and Technology, Kerala, India. So the question is extending a research work in a base paper by using different algorithms for improving accuracy is considered as a research? If yes, then how it can be effectively presented as a research paper?
Okay, so if I understand it correctly, there is a problem, the base paper presents the problem and solves it with one solution method, right?
Yes.
The author wants to try another solution method and submit it again to another journal. So most probably the base paper will go to a good journal. The second paper will go to a C-level journal because we don't consider that a significant contribution. Now, there are exceptions to that. If you're doing algorithmic work and you took the same problem like that lot sizing problem I worked on my thesis, right? And Altay algorithm solves it in 1 hour and you developed an algorithm that solves it in 45 minutes. That's contribution. And then you worked on it with your PhD students or whatever, and then you find, you came up with another solution that solves it in 10 minutes. That's a contribution. But if you take the same problem and the improvement is very little, or your the findings are not really different, basically you arrived, if the problem is my left ear, I can arrive at this way, or I can arrive at this way, right? So, but I end up with the same ear. If the conclusion is the same, and you reach the same conclusion with different methods, that's not contribution. So, yeah, there are times it will work with algorithmic work, for example, computational work, but there are times it's not going to be considered a good contribution. And a lot of the referees use Google. So when they are looking at reading your paper, they Google it, and if they will find your base paper. And they will question your contribution.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for a detailed answer on that. So with this, we come to an end of this event, and as we come to the end of this third webisode, I request Dr. Arun Kumar to propose vote of thanks for this episode.
Sir, Professor Altay. First of all, thank you, sir. Thank you for accepting our invitation and giving this enriching session. Then I will be keeping touch with you, sir. So as you said, a writing class is required for students. So we are also searching how we can conduct or how we can give a training to the students, because as per our new curriculum, we are trying to incorporate a research paper to our postgraduate students. So I need your guidance. Definitely, I will keep in touch with you, sir. I will try to
Absolutely. And I saw some questions in the chat box. I didn't have time to read them. Those people, they can reach out to me. They can email me.
Yes, I share your email ID in the chat box. So somebody has asking. So from this also, Prashant Bagal sir is also asking some questions. So thanks, very nice information given. Just want to know about handling inefficient collaboration issues from many involved organizations in humanitarian supply chain. Any best framework for this available? That is his question.
Collaboration issues from many involved organizations in any best frameworks. Let me answer this offline. If you
Yes.
It's not a straightforward answer.
Good, sir. So we are running out of time. That's another.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you for your enriching session, sir.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm honored. Dr. Sonmane, it's very nice seeing you again. And hopefully after COVID is over, I would like to visit SIOM again. one day.
Thank you so much, Professor Altay. Thank you. And I know it must be around 10:30, 11 there now. Thank you
Yeah,
so much
11.
for staying awake with us. And I must say, it was very simple, honest, and very clear presentation. We are getting a lot of feedback on the chat saying that, it was so informative and it set the priorities very right in that context, Thank
Good.
you so
I'm
much.
glad it helped. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you, sir.
So I end this session with a famous quote by Lao Tzu. The journey of 1,000 miles begin with one step. So join us for the next episode of Editor's Choice on the 20th October with Professor Wei Wei Chen, Rogers University Departments of Supply Chain, New Jersey, USA. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Participants who have joined here. Thank you.
No, it was very good.
Yes,
It
yes.
was very simple, very nice, and
Yes. Informative. Yes.
yeah. Thank you, everyone, and wish you a very, very happy Diwali as we celebrate it in this weekend. After a long time, some celebrations awaited. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
उसकी जैसे नहीं है क्या बोलते हैं जो खतरनाक डायल टाइप बिना वीडियो ऑफ है ना